Good morning, everyone, and thanks very much for turning up. We've been waiting for this day to be able to demonstrate this tool to you all. I'm just going to give a quick overview. I think none of us are a stranger to the context for this, but it never does any harm to really set out that context again and think about the scale of the challenge that faces all of us. We know that the transport sector has performed especially badly in the UK, as it has done indeed in many developed countries. The transport sector in the UK is the only end-use energy sector whereby emissions are greater now than they were in 1990, and it's far exceeded other sectors to sit there on the top of the sector that accounts for the greatest amount of emissions. And we hear a lot about net zero, and of course that's what our Climate Change Act has set out for us as an economy-wide goal by 2050 to reach net zero. However, it's important to understand that within that act, within the budgets that have been set down by the Committee on Climate Change, surface transport is not one of the sectors that is earmarked for benefiting from any negative emissions technologies. Those negative emissions technologies, which in themselves are not certain to be developed at scale, to the extent that they are going to ride in and save us to any extent, they're being saved up for the aviation sector and the land use sector and not for the surface transport sector. That means that actually the language of net zero around most of the things that are dealt with at the local level is incorrect. It's about reaching absolute zero. So what that means in terms of a trajectory is that we need to rapidly switch away from a pathway of no reductions at all, which is what we've achieved essentially so far, to very, very sharp emissions reductions. And I've been involved in very many modelling exercises, as have many other people at different scales. We have modelled various scenario pathways for the sector at the national level, the Scottish level, regional levels. Many people have done this now in their local jurisdictions. And I have seen consistently that the rate of reduction that's required is anywhere between rate of reduction of carbon from transport, surface transport, is anywhere between 6 and 15% per annum from this year onwards. So that's a cumulative year-on-year reduction. And I often put that in context now of thinking about what was achieved, obviously under poorer circumstances last year under COVID, where we saw a 20% reduction in traffic overall across the year. We could equate that to carbon, and we need to achieve that almost every year or every couple of years and keep on doing it year on year. So everywhere has to act, nowhere gets a free pass, and if some places go more slowly, then by implication it's anticipated that other places will go even more quickly than the average of, say, 6% per annum. So I mentioned that lots and lots of local authorities have been doing these scenario analyses for themselves. This is an example of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority reductions pathway, and the ingredients on this slide are really incredibly ambitious. So we've got, setting out the reductions required in car travel, and the targets for other modes of transport. When you look at the plan by West Yorkshire Combined Authority, there is still a significant carbon gap that they have realised that they need to fill, and are scratching their heads, as we all are, as to how we can possibly achieve these commitments. But as I say, there you see authority setting it out as a 21% reduction in car travel, and a very, very large increases in active travel. Next slide, please. We have done some analyses which has sat, if you like, next to the carbon calculator data that you're about to be presented with. that shows just the range of starting points that all the local authorities are starting at. So that's the real variation, which we know about. This histogram shows the distribution of per capita emissions across all districts in the UK, so aggregating up to district level. And there's a variation of a factor of 5 between the highest and the lowest, and a very wide spread. And for lots of reasons which you'll all have a good understanding of, this starting point means that there are very different levels of ambition, very different prospects of what can be achieved, and very different ideas of what each local authority ought and could be responsible for. But our starting point for this carbon calculator is that without actually understanding and diagnosing where the carbon emissions are emanating from in each locality, and without really good sort of diagnostic information, it's going to be very difficult to set realistic carbon pathways. We know that over half of local authorities have declared a carbon emergency. The targets that are being set around that carbon emergency are very varied in and of themselves. Some of those targets relate to just the operations of the local authorities themselves. Others take on the whole transport sector. Others take on transport and other sectors as well. So no consistency in terms of the metrics that are being used, and in terms of the scale and rate of challenge that faces us all. In some work that we carried out for the Local Government Association, we started out with a series of workshops with local authorities to discuss exactly the issues that I've been talking about, what seemed to be the starting point, the ambition, where the balance of effort might lie. And self-evidently, the current ambitions and the current plans for carbon reduction are reflect these starting points, and when added up, are made up, comprised of very varied portfolios of solutions. So breaking things down very broadly into avoid, shift and improve solutions. So avoiding travel, shortening journey distances, more virtual working, shifting, so the modal shift type solutions that we are familiar with, and improvement, which is largely around improving the vehicles that are in our jurisdictions. Those are the main buckets in which we can place our policies, and the balance of effort across those buckets are necessarily going to be very different. But what they could be and should be, as I say, needs diagnostic information. So we have set out to develop this calculator, which will be, the data sources and so on will be explained to you in great detail. It covers more than just the transport sector, as you'll see. And we believe that this tool can be used for a whole variety of different parts of the process of setting the ambition and monitoring the ambition. So first of all, the data itself will enable good measurement of the baseline of the local carbon footprints and the relative contribution of the different sources of emissions across different sectors in the local area. That then hopefully will be useful information to identify the target areas and the sectors. So those areas that are emitting the most, those areas that are perhaps the most malleable. For monitoring any solutions, so as a baseline, and then monitoring as we go forward the progress and the hopefully deep carbon reductions. For benchmarking in comparison to other authorities. So given that this tool is based on data at the local level, the LSOA level, it's possible to use a number of different non-emission based data sources around demographics, topography, economic activity, and that could then allow different authorities to identify themselves with, if you like, to twin themselves with other places of similar composition in order to share experience and benchmark progress against. It could also be used as a prediction and scenario planning tool, given the basis of the data sources and other analyses that exist to help us understand what the projection of emissions might be if we were to pull different levers and different scenarios in terms of demographics going forward. And then finally, the nature of the tool, as you'll see, is very interactive and very open to use for public engagement tool, of which there's a lot of evidence now, given a lot of climate assemblies and other engagements that have been going forward, to show that the public respond very well to much greater understanding of where their neighbourhood, where their household, where their local area sits in relation to other places, and the sort of fairness agenda of who is doing what and who is responsible for what. And we think that this would lend itself very much to helping with those kind of conversations.